well as wood. Actually, tends to be a little bit better wood because you don't have to deal with rain and stuff like that. You know, so there's some different things that I've done. I don't have too much up here. I've actually been working on a platter that I've got at home, and one of the features I want to put on is a couple of eyes, so I've been practicing trying to do some eyes. See how that works out. So paper's good. Paper's a lot cheaper. It's pretty cheap. Wood can sometimes be better because you can just sand it down and do it again if you want to. There's really two different styles of wood burning that I do with this. There is what I call drawing. These are kind of my own names because I go out there and I don't really see how anybody else explains them. But there's basically drawing is one of them that I call, and that's pretty much if you think of anything you can do with a pencil and eraser on a piece of paper, you can do with this stuff. You can do shading, you can make objects look 3D, you can do just basic outline stuff. Things like this I consider drawing. There's no shading involved, it's pretty much just transfer an image on here, follow the lines as you would burn it. But it works out pretty good, I like that. Or you can take it to a different level and you can actually do some shading and some coloring and try to make things look a little more 3D.
Put it on the camera.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You know, that piece that Craig had at the woodworking show, and it's worth taking a look at it.
Another style that I call is called branding. And with that, you're not really drawing stuff on there. What you're doing is you're using your tools to heat up and remove wood. And then that creates a different texture, a different surface when you do that. And that, to me, is something like this here, where I've just gone through and stippled the whole thing, and it just creates a different texture on it.
Just a hair louder, too.
Louder. Okay. So those are the two styles that I do. And like I say, if you go out there and search on that, you won't find those names. They're just what I call them to try to explain the different things you can do here. Let's take a look at what tools do you actually need to do this. Actually, well, obviously, you need a wood burner itself. Here I've got one that was made out of a car battery charger. And there's a YouTube video online that everybody uses to reference on how to build that. It's pretty simple. And then there's store-bought ones. He's got a nibs burner here, which is really nice. I got the Burn Master by MasterCarver. That's nice. And there's different options for these too. Here, we'll talk about that in just a minute. Another thing you need is obviously the pens. There's a lot of different kinds of pens out there. Usually when you buy one of these, the manufacturer itself will make a certain style of pen. You get those. And most of these are interchangeable because they use standard connectors on them. So like this is a pen that came with this. This is a pen from a company called Razor Tip.
It'll plug into his burner.
Yep. Should plug into this too, won't it?
My RCA jacks are down here at the base.
Okay.
So it's a little different.
So you just need a different cord.
Yep.
Okay.
And
I'm sorry.
well, the goal is to be able to control the heat. So each of our machines have dials on them to turn the heat down, make it, or turn it up, make it hotter, or to keep it lower. So you can, depending on whether or not you're doing his eyes, or whether you're doing stippling or texture.
Matt?
Yeah.
Who's louder?
I'm sorry.
Both of you.
Yep.
You can turn the heat up or turn the heat down, depending on whether or not you need fine control or shading, or whether or not you're doing stippling or texturing.
Okay. So some of the other tools you need in doing this, at least like what I use, you need something on your bench to either set the piece on, be soft. A lot of people use like a beanbag type material because the piece will actually sit in there real nice. I just use a piece of foam with the towel over it. Mostly for me, I tend to actually like hold my piece while I'm doing it. So when I sit there, it allows me to rest my arms on there. Because after a while on the edge of the table, your arms will start to hurt. So that's something that helps. An X-Acto knife is used a lot. When you're burning, if you burn too much, you can use an X-Acto knife to scrape some of it off, make it a little bit lighter. It's kind of your form of eraser almost. Let's see, obviously you need good light, and if you're like me, you need glasses. Magnified glasses, rather. So let's talk about the burners themselves. That's what Matt was starting on. That like most of these burners are pretty much the same. At least they all run off the same concept. You've got a dial for your heat. You've got either 1 or 2 ports. There you go. All right. You got a dial for your heat. You got a couple of ports. Some of them only have 1 port. We were having a discussion on that earlier. If I was to buy this model over again, I'd probably just get the 1-port one. The 2-port doesn't really serve me as much as I would like for the extra cost for doing it. Matt uses his 2 ports all the time, and he likes his. What else? I mean, this model has you know, a place to put your tips when they're hot. Some of them do, some of them don't. To contrast that, is this one here, which is a homemade, made out of, like I said, a battery charger. So it's just, it's got 1 port there, a little fuse holder. There's your dial. So this works, not as nicely as these.
What's the difference?
The big difference really is, actually, I'll connect that in. The big difference is really the dial. This dial is meant for house lighting, so it's not as exact as you move it up and down. And a lot of times you really want to get your heat at just a certain level, and it's hard to do on this. Okay? Now this will put out a lot of power, but so does this. You know, so it's the same thing. Like he mentioned, it'll save you money. I don't really think it'll save you any money. By the time you buy this switch, you spend your time going around getting these parts, you put it all together, you still don't have pens. These things come with pens. So you gotta either buy some pens or make some pens. You're spending a lot of time, and I don't think you're gonna get as good quality. So I think in the long run, this is gonna end up costing you more. Not only in money, time, and probably frustration too, because it won't work as well.
Well, what did the Burn Master cost? Do you recall?
The single port one runs about $199. I think this one runs like $250, somewhere around there. I paid $250. That was a few years ago. It's probably, I don't know.
And the nibs?
It's $189. I have a 2-port one and a switch between them. It's $189. Most of these places too, if you screw up one of your tips, you can send it back in and they'll fix them for free. All you pay is the shipping. That's happened with me with this burner. I know that Razor Tip does that too. I don't know about the Burn Master tips, but
okay, because they're all their tips are on screw.
Yeah.
Usually that only applies to the fixed tip pieces that you.
Yep.
I just got one.
Oodles and oodles more of them, but the 3 basic ones. You've got the skew. I don't know if this is.
Yeah, it's showing, right?
Okay. There you go. Okay.
Even better.
So the skew here is just like the skew we use for turning wood. It's a nice, pointy, thin, sharp little guy that'll stab you if you're not careful. It is ideal for making straight lines. It makes nice, thin, straight lines. You can use it for some curved lines, but it's a little bit more difficult because it is so pointy. It'll also tend to cut into the wood nice. That also means it'll tend to follow the grain too if you're not careful. That's one I use a whole lot. There is the shader, which is like that. And it's basically just it's got a flat area on it. So when you're heating up, you're covering a larger area and you can shade things in and out. You go from darker to light as you're pulling it along. Okay, so that's nice for making things look 3-dimensional and things like that, giving things a shadow. And then the third one is just what's called a writing nib. It's just pretty much a round piece of wire on the end of this thing. Okay? Unlike the skew, which is pointy. Unlike the skew, which is pointy, this isn't, and this allows you to go around circles better, draw curves better, but it does give you a thicker line than the skew. And then, of course, there are plenty of homemade. You can take these and put your own tips on them. or you can make your own pens if you want, which is pretty good. I like doing some of these because when I'm doing branding and you're doing a lot of things repeatedly over and over and over, trying to hold on to something like this, like if you're writing something, nobody writes it, if you remember when you're back to writing, your fingers can get tired constantly over and over and over doing that. So I made something like this, which allows me to hold it and put more of the pressure on the palm of my hand, and I can sit there for a longer period of time doing that. Okay. So these are pretty simple to make. Here's another one. Create any style you want, whatever works best for your hand. Larger, smaller. Let's see. If you do go out and buy store pens, which you ultimately will, there are oodles of different kinds of these things. They come in plastic like this, they come in metal, they've got replaceable tips, they've got tips like this one that is in there permanently, and this is one of the ones Matt was talking about. If I wear this out, I can send it back to Razor Tip, and for like $10 they'll retip the thing for me and send it back. You know, otherwise it's like a $30 pen, $40 pen.
And I just had to pay shipping.
Yep. Some of them, like this one here, has nice padding on it, which is helpful. This one here that flares out helps keep the heat from your hand, which is kind of nice. But because it's not round, it's kind of like three-sided, it can be a little bit harder to try to draw curves and circles in that. Whereas something that's like this, it'll roll in your hand easier as you're drawing. Let's see. In doing this, you notice I've got some sample boards up here. These are important because they allow you to practice, they allow you to experiment with different things, different styles, and they allow you later on to go back when you're doing something, you're saying, oh, I don't know what kind of style or what kind of design I want to put on that. And you always go back to your sample boards and reference and get ideas on something. Yes?
Before you get farther, what kind of cable is that you guys, is that special wiring, like the ones you make?
No, this is lamp cord.
That's all it is?
Yep, just standard lamp cord.
His connector into his unit is some of these jacks here, and mine is an RCA jack. So, and I could make these the same way he made those, using the same cords. I just have to use the RCA jack instead.
So this is just a mono phone jack from Radio Shack. Lamp cord. You turn whatever wood you want. Denser hardwood is better because it'll help keep the heat from coming up. So obviously something like Coca-Cola would probably work wonderful, but who's going to waste Coca-Cola on something like that? I don't know. This year I think it was just maple or cherry. And then Radio Shack also sells terminal strips. You take apart the terminal strips and you get these little ends with the little screw inserts on there that you can connect to the wire and you can use for your tips.
Buy them now before they're all closed.
Yeah, that's right. And then you just epoxy them in there. You're good to go.
Is that in your handout thing, or will that be on the website?
No, actually, I didn't do that. I can update that, put it in.
Why isn't your wood burning when you're on your homemade ones? Why isn't your handle burning?
It will after a while if it gets hot enough. It'll get warm, just like these other ones will get warm too. Because that's all this really is. You don't need real drawing experience for a lot of this stuff. If you don't have it, I know I don't, never had. It's just a matter of transferring your image on here, whether you draw it on with a pencil, whether you use graphite paper to trace it on, which is what I do a lot of, or you use one of those blender pens and you take a Xerox copy and put it on and transfer it on that way.
We also make this stuff. It's called Pyro paper. It's designed to be printed in your printer, and then you can burn right through it. It's fairly thin, so that's another option. But I use mostly graphite paper like Craig does.
Yeah. The reason I like
the paper, that paper there.
I think I got that at Amazon, through Amazon.com somewhere. I did search on it.
Maybe graphite?
The graphite,
Any art
Joann's,
store.
yeah, Joann's, Michael's, any of those places sell it. Probably Walmart sells it. Yeah.
I've switched to using the graphite paper more than a blender pen, because with the graphite paper, it's easy to erase off of there. The blender pen's a little more difficult to get it off afterwards, if you haven't completely burnt over it.
Well, with the graphite paper, you can get it in dark and white.
Yep.
And that's nice, so you can actually
Yep.
transfer something on dark
You can
wood.
go
and
to
see it.
Blick Art, and they got multiple colors of graphite paper. You get it red and all kinds of stuff. So,
Yep.
so if one of those helps you,
Is that sticky back? Or can you just use spray adhesive to put it on?
Yeah, it's still in the package, I haven't even opened it. I don't think so.
So you can just use spray adhesive? Okay, so you just use like 3M spray.
To consider when you're turning your piece and you're going to put a decoration on it, is do a little advanced planning about how you want your make sure you canvas for what your decoration is going to do. So if I'm going to do, I do a lot of Celtic art, piece that looks like this, okay? And in order to lay it out, I make sure that I leave a fairly wide rim on the bowl or the plate or whatever, so there's room for the decoration. Now on this piece here, I've done one of the things that Craig talked about doing. I cut a small groove here, and then I stuck a piece of the sample stuff from a hardware store in there while it was turning on the lathe to burn the groove in there, okay? And that gave me a room, sort of a defining area between the inside of the bowl. I'm going to pass it around. So, yeah. Are you going to do it like that? Yeah. You got it? Yep. Okay. So, but the bottom line is I left enough space so that there was plenty of room for whatever decoration I decided to put on it. So this piece here, this is a piece of old Czech box elder I had sitting in the wood pile. And the shape I did for this is I left space across here. Is this on camera? Okay. And I rounded off the edge, okay? So that if my decorations wandered over the edge, it did a sort of a smooth transition between it. Now, on this piece, I had planned to do something, and I left my Dremel at home because I was distracted in the way of the house, so I'm not going to do that. But I also left some tear out, and I left a hole in the bottom when I parted it off, and I left some tear out on here so that I could demonstrate how to hide that with wood burning too. On a plate like this, I've left this template, and another one is inside the PDF that'll be up on, it's inside the presentation somewhere, the PowerPoint. And I've left a band here on the outside for a decoration, and I use this to lay it out. It's basically there's a line every 10 degrees of the compass. And that's how I laid out the Celtic artwork on this, and I'll show you how I did that in a bit. I guess I can show it right now. All right. When I first started doing Celtic artwork on turned work, it looked kind of clunky. As I was explaining to the lady who was up here before, Celtic artwork is very regular, very geometric. And if you screw something up, if one knot is thicker or thinner than the other, it becomes readily apparent because you can look at the design and something looks out of place. So I was looking for a better way to lay things out on a turned piece of wood and in a more geometric fashion without getting too precise, engineering precise, because I kind of like to do things quicker. So what I did is I printed these little templates, like this one here is 10 degrees, so there's a line every 10 degrees. I got another one in there that's 15 degrees. And then I use these to lay out the artwork around the edge. So for instance, I try to get this centered, all right? Tape it in so it's in place, and then I put a dot, a grid dot here, halfway between the edges of where my design is going. So I put one here. And it's in line with this line here, in line with this line here, in line with this line here, in line with this line here. And I start when I walk them around the whole plate, okay? And then I do another grid mark between them, half of the distance between the line between the two, and I'm just guessing here at this point, okay? And these are going to serve as my lines my guidance lines for when I do the burning. So I'm using my skew tip on this, and then I start. Let's see here. Then I start burning. So I'm doing my lines like this. Is that see? Yep, okay. And I use those grid lines for the Celtic work, and I can do them I would normally do these things in pencil, but the Celtic work I can do in Sharpie, because where those dots are going to be, they're going to be filled in later. All right, so you're passing that bowl around, you can see where they're filled in later. And then I do the next lines here, like this, around those dots, okay? And then when I look here to do where the lines are starting, I'm looking at the lines I've already drawn and doing them, continuing them, okay? How's that maple smell, you guys? And then the one I do on the back side is around the dots this way. Now, I've done this a lot, okay? So like Craig was saying, every bit of practice you do helps, and you gotta complete the lines here so they all match, and so on. So that's with the skew. Now I'm going to switch. This is why I like having the two pens. And I'm going to switch to the other one and get my shading tip here.
Can you move it over to the mark a little bit? No, you're
And what I'm doing here is I'm just shading. All right, now when you're shading, one of the things I'm doing is I'm starting heavy where I want the darker stuff to be, and I'm picking the pen up and moving it faster away from that point, okay? The faster you move the pen, the lighter the burn you're going to leave, okay? Right? The longer you stay in one place, the thicker it's going to be. So now one of the things I want to do with the parts that are, I can't see what I'm doing. One of the things I want to do with the parts inside here, where the Sharpie marks are, is I want to sort of carve those out. And one of the descriptions that they used down at Aramont when we were doing the class last summer with Dixie Biggs is she talked about carving with wood burning. So I'm going to use this pen to carve that section out between the knots. Okay? And what I'm doing is the part that I've already burned with the skew serves as a sort of a dam to keep the heat away from the parts that I haven't burned. And I'm using it to carve out that section in between the knots because I want it all black.
You're doing that with the shader?
I'm doing that with the shader. And one of the things that happens a lot, I keep sandpaper because you get carbon buildup. So if you guys would like to take a look at that, so I'm going to pass that. Thanks, Craig. That's the work that I just did. Yes?
Sometimes I use sandpaper, but I've kind of switched to mostly just use a brass brush now to clean it off.
This is quicker for me. This is 400 grit. That seems to take it off pretty good, and it doesn't.
You can see it building up on there.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, well, you do it as often as you need to, depending on how often you're doing dark.
Right. Paper will remove overburn. And what overburn is if you're going too hot and the burn like gets across into an area you didn't want to burn, usually sandpaper will take it right off. You may have to go back over the area you already burned, okay? Yeah.
What if you draw a wrong line? I don't understand how would you get rid of the line?
Put it back on the lathe and turn it down again.
So with the temperature adjustment, if you're switching pens, I guess this is a question, if you're turning down the heat, how long does it take the temp to drop down on that pen?
Pretty close against the thing.
It's very close.
Okay.
You could have marks on your thing. You could have marks on your dial if you changed over from one pen or you right to speed.
Yeah, you're right. When you heat the sucker up, when you first put it on the wood, as soon as it touches the wood, it's going to start dissipating heat. So if you've got a skew and you're pulling a line, you're going to notice that the start of your line is generally darker than as you go on and on and on. So there's a couple of ways you can do around that. Move the pen quicker, and it won't heat up. It won't lose its heat as quickly as you do your line. Another thing you can do is, before you touch the tip to the wood, just lightly blow on it, cool it off just a little bit, and then you might not get that real dark spot to start with.
Or can I suggest
Sure.
a little scrap of wood to the side?
I do that a lot too. I take another scrap of wood and hit it on that and then go and do that. I also use a scrap of wood to help me get the right heat setting to begin with. You know, a lot of times when I'm doing a turning, whatever was on connected to the chuck, I'll save that so I've got the exact same wood that I'm using, and then that's something I can play with to get me the right heat setting.
It's real important. Gentleman back.
Yes.
As far as the templates goes, there's a website called blocklayer.com.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
A website called blocklayer.com.
Block layer?
And it has many different kinds of templates that you can find that are useful, scale laws. And as far as the battery charger goes, I wonder if you put a volt or ammeter in that circuit, you would have a better idea to regulate the heat rather than just the big dial setting.
Yeah, and well, this one here, it does have tips. You can go out to eBay and you can buy nichrome wire. And that's what we use to make our tips. And you can get it in different thicknesses. This is 18 gauge. You can get it down to 22 gauge. You can probably get it even smaller, but most of what you would use would be between 18 and 22 gauge wire. And you can just cut off, you can buy this, like I bought it in a 10-foot section. I've had this I don't know how long, because you're typically only using 2 to 3 inches at a time. And when you make tips, you can just bend it into any kind of shape you want. You know, like if you want to do a basket weave, you can wrap it around several times. And then you just put it in your thing and heat it up, and you're good to go, and it's pretty quick.
Put it over the X.
Over the X, right there. You know, I've got...
It's 2 loops around the screwdriver.
Yep. When I did this one here, I didn't draw each one of those little squiggly lines itself. I never would have gotten them all to look the same. So instead, I just made a tip. That's a squiggly line. And then all I had to do is just go around and hit it like that to get those lines. You know, so doing things like that can make your job a lot easier.
There's a lot of different ways. The basket weave is usually wrapped fairly tight. The wires are fairly tight. I have to use 22 gauge on my nibs burner because larger gauge wires or the thicker wires don't fit in my little handpiece for the make-it-yourself tips. And one of the things that I did is not only do I have what they call a basket weave tip, but I was looking at it after I was over at Steve Rohr's place and we were experimenting with it for a little bit. And I took a knife and I separated them out a little bit. So if I turn the heat down and separate them out, I can draw parallel lines with that thing, which is also a neat sort of texture thing. Steve's going to show. Okay.
So this is one just multiple circles right there.
And it's hot.
See, that's how it's going now. And you can, unfortunately, this isn't working out real well here the way I'm at, but you can just do multiple.
Can you push
You
it
don't
more
need to be
under the
that
light?
hot, but. So now if I was more exact, you could make this actually look like a real basket weave here, and I just went out of sync there, but that's okay. So that's one way of doing it. And I guess one thing I didn't mention earlier, in terms of tools that you need, I always have a fan sitting next to me.
Yeah.
And you don't have the fan blowing towards you because it will keep cooling off the tip. You have it sucking the smoke away.
That showed up.
So now I'm getting that all black on my fingers.
Another thing you can use this for is for fixing things sometimes, or adding something that looks like a texture that's actually covering something up. On this little piece here that I did earlier, along the bottom rim here, I added some Terra. I did it intentionally with my very thin scraper so that I could show you guys how to fix it. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create something, a decoration along the bottom of this piece, okay, that covers that up. So I'm going to turn this up a little bit, and I'm going to use my shading tip, and I'm going to pull it away from the edge.
You can keep it by,
He's going from behind.
Oh, okay. So I'm on the tear out right now, and I'm pulling it up like this. I'm trying to get the tear out all good and black so you can't tell it's there. And this is like, I've got it at 6.5, which is not very hot. I could probably make it hotter. And when I pull it away, the quicker I pull it away, the thinner line it leaves. I won't go all the way around, but you get the right idea that it gives us that. Hit this with a little bit of. So what it gives you, can you see, does this make sense, Mo? Okay. What it gives you is it gives you a little decoration in the bottom here.
See it, I'm going to show them the top.
Tip it just a little wrong side towards me.
Turn the bottom.
Flip it over.
Turn it over towards me. Flip it over. So you're perfect. So basically, if this is sitting on the ground, on the table, I'll pass this around so you can see it. It covers up what was there, the mess up that you did with the wood, and it gives an added feature to the piece. So.
Not bad, not bad.
That's all you got. Okay. Switch to something else. I was over at Steve Orr's place too. Did not bring my needle nose pliers. You got a pair? Awesome. Why needle nose pliers? Because the tips are hot when you take them out of the piece. This is. This is my basket weave tip that's been spread out a little bit with a knife. Okay, this shows you. Put it on. The right thing. Get this out. It's okay. It's not something in fire.
A little more.
There you go.
All right. This one here lets me draw. If I keep the heat down, lets me draw roughly parallel lines. So I can use it to provide this kind of texture. And I line them up. So that's another idea, okay? You guys can see that, right?
What shape is that? Is that like a basket weave?
It's like a basket weave, only what I did is I basically took a table knife and inserted it between each of the little tongs so that it spread them out a little bit.
So what gauge wire did you use?
I use 22 gauge because it's the only one that fits in my thing.
If you were going to get the basket weave, then you go sideways with it too, vertical and sideways, right?
Yep.
Vertical and horizontal. I know horizontal.
Yep. Or you could,
Rotating 90.
Yeah, and you can do lots of different things with the basket weave. I mean, you can make all, you can herringbone patterns and stuff like that. It's basically, see that, the defects come up to it. It's basically just a simple loop and they're pushed together. So I've got a very, I can write my,
Where's the X mark?
it's not,
You're okay.
so I can, and the grain is not, I can write my name with it. The grain is not,
Turn it towards Paul. No, Paul.
I can see.
The other guy.
Just
The
Paul.
other Paul, yeah.
So, but you can do things like, it's very flexible because it's not, you know, it doesn't, it's very thin amount of tip on the wood and so on. So, I don't know what else.
Do you sharpen those, or is it just?
You could. I've got one or two that I've used a hammer to flatten and used, I mean, you'd want, if you're making a skew, say you want a different kind of skew, that would need to be sharpened. The fish scale one, I've seen people do fish scale ones, and those are basically, they put them on they make a loop, and then you put them on, you flatten the loop, and then you use a grinder to shape it. And basically a fish scale one looks like a sort of a half moon, a crescent moon, or not a half moon, a crescent moon. And I don't know if I can reverse that with this. This is not the best use your own tip handpiece. The razor tip ones and the one that you have work better. So,
Can you show us what you did?
wait, on this, yeah. Cherry's my favorite too.
So you don't get as much of the overburn on that? I mean, those are pretty fine lines.
Overburn is a control issue.
Yeah.
Okay, heat control and pen control issue.
Do you get less water with that?
Yeah. To me, it comes down to grain. If you've got something like, say on extreme, if you're taking your red oak, it's got a big open grain, your tips are going to want to follow that grain all the time, and you're fighting that. Cherry, I don't have that issue.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of success with hard maple too. I really don't like ash, and I don't like oak either for burning. Yeah.
You know, when you guys make your own tips out of nichrome, the ones that you buy, they tell you you're supposed to anneal them. You know, like zap them right when you first get them. Pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. The ones you make, you can anneal. Check with the manufacturer, because some of them, they say don't anneal them. It's already done at the factory, and you don't want to do anything. Yes?
How about cleaning them?
Cleaning them, again, I just use a brass brush.
Sandpaper.
Because that takes the life away from your tip then, right?
At 400 grit, it's going to be a long time before it's...
I've had one tip break in 8 years of using the burner, so, you know, your mileage may vary.
Do we have more examples up there that during a break you can come up and see?
Yep. Yep. And I brought some reference books if you guys want to see some of the reference books. A lot of them are in the PDF.
This one here, with this design on here, basically I took one of the basket weave type that just coiled around. I coiled it around a nail, and then just let it heat up the nail. Just took the tip with the end of the nail and hit it in there over and over again. So there's a lot of things you can experiment with and try different ways to make different designs.
So you use the nail as your burner then?
Yeah, the tip of the nail, which was hot, was.
Our spring,
The bear.
you brought out any burning?
Yep, My burning is entirely different.
Is it?
Yes, because I do fine art. I don't, I do some patterning, which is an art in itself, but I do fine art.
Can we see what you have?
Where do you want to see it? Up there?
Yeah, yep.
Just stand right up in the front
You
there.
guys can offer, show it.
Stand right up in the front.
Wildlife art, but I'm also a portrait artist. And the first time that I did any burning at all, a friend of mine brought me his burner, and he said, I want you to do portraits of 7 children on the outside of a bowl that he had turned. And I can draw, and I can paint, but I never burned in my life. It took me 1.5 years to work up the nerve to burn the bowl. I was drawing, but it took me a whole year just to get it in my head that I could put that nib to that bowl and not ruin it. And it turned out really well. But my preference is wildlife art. Now, these are small. So can I set them up here? Or I don't know.
Just put them on the stage and look at them.
So they'll show off.
Well, give me one to put up in the.
Okay. These, you know what? I'll just pass them.
Okay.
They're much easier to see. These are all wood burn. They're original art.